Good day and welcome to episode 4 of Quilting with Don. Quick recap, episode 3 saw me sewing 792 triangles, and I did it. It's right behind me here and it's gorgeous. I love it. So this is only maybe about halfway through the journey of Quilting with Don because, right, the core of the top is done, but it's not a quilt yet. It still needs borders, at least I think it does. Then of course it needs quilting, and eventually it needs binding. In that order. So, in my mind, this is a beautiful top, but it's not of a size that's practical. It's 62 inches wide and it's about 84 inches tall. It won't really fit any beds that we have in our house. So I Googled what a queen size blanket, how big, pardon me, a queen size blanket should be, and it turns out it should be about 90 inches wide and 100 inches tall, give or take, right? I guess there's not an exact size, but that's the size I'm aiming for. So clearly my quilt then has to gain by up to 30 inches in width and almost 20 inches in height. That lends to borders. So this is where I'm going to go next. But first, last episode was long enough. I didn't really get to do a recap on some of the important things I learned. So I'm going to give it to you now. The biggest thing I think, if I were to do this all over again, the biggest thing I would do is pay attention to the order I cut the triangles in. It would have made it much nicer to have each of the verticals and even the other on an angle bars of color flow. And if I had kept the order of the triangles from when I cut them, then that would have happened much easier. The second big thing as a wrap up from sewing this is actually something I mentioned in the first Quilting with Don 2 years ago. And I call it the PCP of quilting. It almost sounds like, intense drugs. But it stands for precision, consistency, and patience. In my mind, those are the big three for sewing your quilt top. Precision is obvious. Be precise where you pin, be precise where you sew, be precise how you put it together. Consistency, because if you're precise, you have to stay precise, but not only that, the methodology you're using, the methodology I used, I stuck to my routine. Sure, I might have been able to do something more efficient, but then I might have changed things up. I needed to be consistent so that when it all came together, it was the same, and that I'm expecting when I actually start measuring this properly and getting it ready for borders that it's relatively square. Consistency is a part of keeping things square. And finally, patience. I mentioned that at the end of the last episode that I kind of got rushed. So, especially on something that's more complicated, you need to have patience. You need to sometimes realize things aren't quite going the way you'd like, and you fix it. If you're not patient, you'll keep blasting ahead saying, I won't worry about it. And then it'll get to the point where you can't fix it. So take your time, be patient, and recognize when something's going wrong and fix it. Right. Let's move forward with the next phase, which is the borders. So in the past few episodes, I have followed the pattern religiously. The only thing I changed up was the background colors. Now we're getting into the stuff where I get to play a little bit with something that I come up with. So this is Don designing, if you will. And after measuring the top behind me, I blocked out on a piece of paper what I wanted. What I want to do is make this quilt top more queen-sized, so it needs to get wider, and I also wanted to add some graphical elements, some 3D graphical elements with the same colors. So here's what I came up with. First of all, I am going to pad the sides with some white fabric. Just add a couple of pieces like that. Then the graphical elements I want to add are the simple 3D boxes. So that's what I came up with. Blue boxes in the corners and the other colors around the edges. And of course, while I'm actually laying those out with the triangles, I would be filling those in with the white fabric like this to make an overall quilt top that is about 90 inches wide and about 100 inches tall. That is the plan. What could go wrong? Before we get going, thought I'd give you a quick update on the snowstorm we had 2 days ago. See, we're not supposed to get snow in the News Bay. Yet here it is. You could tell something about me by looking at the driveway here. A couple things actually. One is I'm anal about the driveway. And two, if you look around, no one else is like this. Why? Because I have a snowblower. Yeah, it's pristine. Check it out. Beautiful. In preparation for the borders, I am now going to trim off the points at the top and bottom of the quilt top that I've already made, right? Before adding any borders. And I've mostly squared it up. I can't fit the whole top on the cutting table here, which is an old oak desk, which works great as a cutting table. Now you can see in a close-up here where the triangle meets a point. You want the thread, you want the seam to go so right through that point, right? So what you do then is you take the ruler and you line it up so that it shows that you've got at least a 1/4 inch on the ruler or more, but at least a 1/4 inch. So that the edge of the ruler is then going to be, and I'll show you over here, trying to avoid the reflection, it roughly lines up with where the notch is on each piece of the fabric, right? Sometimes it'll be above the notch, sometimes it'll be below, but the point is you're going to get a nice 1/4 inch, as you can see with the green and white here, got at least a 1/4 inch where that green point comes to, just maybe a little more, and that's okay. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to cut this. The other key point that Carolyn highlighted for me, because I was going to take, she has this one ruler that's massive. I was going to do it in one shot, thinking that's the right thing to do to get a nice straight edge. No. Problem with that is there is some give and take in the material, and it's very hard to get it to line up perfectly for one long shot. So you do it in smaller sections like I've got here. This ruler is right here. And so I'll be cutting 2 to 3 points at a time, readjusting the ruler and cutting the next few points. And because it's precision work, I'm going to wear my extra good reading glasses and away we go. This may be a design flaw in the pattern, but if it is, it's minor, and it's something I just caught. I trimmed off the tops and bottoms very successfully, but you'll notice right here that that corner is not square. That's actually designed, the triangle was designed that way. So what I ended up doing on the other side, and I'll show you in a sec, is I unsewed this piece. So here's the one I just successfully unsewed, replaced, and sewed back in. Now you can see I've got a nice 90-degree corner there. The reason I did that, because if that fabric was not there, there's a very good possibility when I added the border on this side and over here, that I would have a little hole or would be no sewing thread there. It would be a weakness. Not good enough. Update. It's been a long day. I spent the good portion of today sewing more triangles to make those box patterns that you see behind me. Turned out that was 100 triangles that I hadn't really thought I was going to do, but I blasted through pretty quick because I got the hang of it. And then I scored them up. Each box is 8.5 inches tall by 7.5 inches wide. That's great. That helps me understand how I'm going to make my borders, because now I know that when I put the white fabric in between those boxes, I know exactly the dimensions I need to do. I think I have had a good day. Tomorrow I'm hoping to finish off the borders. We should see how it goes. I've earned myself a beer. So what I'm cracking right now is a beer out of England called Innocent Gun. It's an oaked beer. I really enjoyed this one. One of my favorite Belgian beers was also oaked. I even have the Innocent Gun glass. So, you know, life is good. So I'll pour that and have a wee beer, because I've earned it. It's gone well today. Had to do a bit of workarounds, thank goodness for Carolyn, because she made sure I stayed on the straight and narrow as far as getting it right. Oh, yeah, you can't see the beer. It's the sewing machine's in the way. There we are. So here's my Innocent Gun beer. And those who know me know I have a glass for every beer, because that's what you did in Belgium, that's what I do. So, happy quilting. Don't drink and sew. That never gets old. I spent a bit of time this morning doing math to make sure I understand exactly the sizes of the fabric I'm going to cut. And you know what? There's some good math and there's some necessary calculations that need to be done before you start cutting things. Which maybe that's not obvious. I said this before, 2 years ago. It's surprising how much math is involved when you're piecing things together. As far as measuring, calculating, even some trigonometry and geometry. It's pretty impressive. It's not just throwing things together. You want to get it right, you want to get it right the first time. So, I got to give my hats off to the sewers and the quilters out there that do this all the time. It's cool. I think I've got this figured out. So, the next thing I'm going to do now is cut off 2 long 7-inch strips of the whitish fabric, the same fabric I used on the background of my pattern. I'm going to use, I've got the wide back material. I'm going to cut long strips from that because I need 2 85 1/8 inch strips of fabric that are 7 inches wide. That's my padding on the quilt. Alright, I'm just getting ready to mark the center of my fabric so I can start doing the first border on the left hand side to the left here. So I folded it over to mark the halfway point and Wobbert decided to help me out. In fact, I think he's trying to tell me I wasn't quite doing it right. Alright, Wobbs? I am making progress. It's still going slower than I'd hoped and I may not get the borders done today. Probably won't get them done today, but I'm making progress. What I've done so far, and it took me a better part of the morning to not only figure out how to do it, but to actually do it, is I've only sewed on the 2 padding strips, 7.5 inches, or pardon me, 7 inches wide on both sides of the quilt. So you can see most of it here behind me. There's 2 ways I can go from here, and that is to add the top and then fill in the sides, or add the sides and then fill in the top. And I'm going to go with the latter. So I've already done my math. I know what the length of this side is that I'm going to meet up with. I know the size of these 2 triangles are going to go on the sides. They're going to go here, they're going to go one over, but they're going to go here. So I cut a 7.5 inch strip because that's how wide these triangle boxes are. And I cut the lengths I need unfinished and then sew on the 2 boxes to the white strips. If I've done my math right, it'll come out to the 85 1/8 inches long that I already measured for the padding strips, and I'll add it to both sides. I will say one more thing. Pinning was and will continue to be my friend. I had to do some easing, as you would expect, because the quilt top wasn't perfectly square. It was close. It was out by about 3/4 of an inch. Over 84 inches, 85 inches, that's not bad, right? And that's about 1%. So not terrible, but I just making sure that there was no puckering. It took a lot of pinning and easing. I did it. I had a lot of guidance from Carolyn. So I'm carrying on. All right, sewing on the far leftmost border. All pinned, ready to go. And done that one border. Alright, so here's what I've done so far today. It is now just about 7 o'clock at night. I've been at this all day. And it's taken me all day to measure, size, cut, and sew both the padding white border to the left and right of the main diagram and then the borders with the 3D boxes. This is the only space I have right now that I can show you this, and I haven't even added the top and bottom borders yet. But it is definitely 90 inches wide and it's about 85 inches tall. So there you go. There's my cat Wobbert. Actually, our cat Wobbert, trying to help me again. Wobbert! How's the quilt looking, Wobbs? Alright, I'm just about to start the very last border. This is the bottom horizontal strip that I've already sewn with the 3D boxes, and it's now going on to the bottom of the quilt. And then the quilt top, theoretically, is done. And that's it. That's it. I'm now going to lay it out and we'll have a final look at it and go from there. I'm done the quilt top and it came out great. I am super pumped by how fabulous this looks. Wow. That's all I can say is wow. Quilting with Dawn episode 4 would not be complete if I didn't sample another fine beverage. This particular beverage is not whiskey, but it's also wonderful for sipping. It's a rum. That's right, you heard right, a rum, a sipping rum. It's from Venezuela, this particular one. It's called Flor de Caña, and it is an 18-year-old rum. It is wonderful. If you enjoy rum and mixing drinks, you really have to try drinking rum straight up. It would be a shame, just like it would be a shame to mix a fine whiskey. It'd be a shame to mix this fine rum. Oh, it just smells sweet and rich. So this has been quite the adventure. Next episode, which will be the final episode of Quilting with Dawn, I'm going to put this baby on the long arm machine and quilt it. It's going to make it work. I am very stoked about this quilt. I think it's coming out great, but it's not done yet. So with that thought, keep on quilting, keep on sewing, enjoy it, and cheers.